Now recognized for 5 minutes, Mr. Gohmert of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate the witnesses being here. Just so that we can inform our full committee chairman, who said that the Guam information is not relevant to anything here. The subject of this hearing is, according to the Democrats, evidence of current and ongoing voting discrimination. And here is the form that was used in Guam. It is relevant in this decade that we would have a form like this, and not one of the groups represented here would go stand up and say this is absolutely intolerable to make somebody go through, and even down to the mother and father, both parents, certifying you were a native in 1950. It is prejudicial to the groups of Chinese, Palauan, Japanese, Pohnpian, the Korean, all of those that were not there in 1950. And I appreciate the looks I'm getting from some of our witnesses, but it really is embarrassing that nobody stepped up. Mr. Christian, I recall a Black Panther intimidation case that occurred when you were there at the Justice Department. Were you allowed to go ahead and get judgment against those people that were intimidating at an election site?
Well, I confess I've tried to forget about that case, but I'll do my best.
I'm just asking,
right.
Were you allowed?
The case was dismissed as to, I believe, 2 defendants, corporate defendant. I think the man, Mr. Jackson was dismissed against 2 of the defendants, right.
And you were not allowed to pursue that. It was dismissed.
Well, it's yeah, there's a long record there.
Well, and you mentioned this incident in Guam where the Justice Department under the Obama administration would not go in and say, this is wrong. We can't have these kind of forms. It doesn't matter what your race is. You ought to be able to come in and vote. Who was head of the Civil Rights Section at that time in 2012?
That's a good question. I'm not sure exactly who was the head of the Assistant Attorney General. I know that after that the Inspector General questions were directed toward the voting section chief, who said that ripeness was the barrier.
Well, I know you testified to that, but I know Tom Perez was there at some point.
He may have been the AAG, I can't remember.
And where's he now?
DNC.
Yeah, he's chair of the DNC, that's right. Now, our chairman of the full committee called them draconian voter ID laws. And I know he's apparently not aware, but I know I read in 2012, the Democratic National Convention would not allow anyone to come in and vote unless they had, in their words, a state-issued ID. Wow. The Democratic National Convention is using and has used in this decade a draconian voter ID requirement. That's incredible. Having gone through John Fund's book, Stealing Elections, John Fund makes the point that the greatest election fraud is the statement that there is no election fraud. It's gone on for years for those that don't know. You can go back and look at Duval County in Texas or Cook County in Illinois. It has gone on, and there are places it still goes on. And anytime we allow people to vote without showing some evidence that they're allowable to vote, it disenfranchises all of the legally voting people and people that vote more than once. Anyway, there are a lot of problems that need to be dealt with, and it's just amazing to me. Let me tell you, back when this was reauthorized, I wanted to vote for the VRA. It needed to be reauthorized. But none of you have brought up, it had a formula that required punishing states for what had happened 50 years before. Generations were being punished. And I went to the Republican leader at that point of this committee, Mr. Sensenbrenner, and as I recall, there was a district in Wisconsin that had racial disparity, and he said, we're not changing that 50-year-old formula. We're going to keep punishing the original states. And I went to John Conyers, and he was very gracious. And he said, Louie, let me talk to some people. And he did. He said, you got a good point, but we're going to be able to get it passed. Let's let it go to the courts. I said, it's going to be struck down. And I named some very liberal people, including the dean from the New York Law School that just left there. And he said, yeah, it's got to be struck down. It's unconstitutional. For those that were not aware, we should not be punishing generations for the sins of 50-year before generations. That is where we ought to be able to come together. Let's deal with racial disparity where it is and then allow Section 5 in those. But I was not allowed to have that as an amendment. That's why we are here with you blaming Shelby County. I yield back.